So while the panelists are getting ready, we do have a final panelist who's not here in person, and this is the chair of the Disability Access Group at British Computer Society. His name is Howard. He's been following remotely. Howard is deaf and blind, but he's still been following remotely, and we have a message from him as a first-time participant in the IGF.
Good afternoon. I'm Howard Leicester, chair at the British Computer Society's Digital Accessibility Specialist Group. I'm joining you remotely because of deafblindness and having a guide dog who would have eaten everything on the floor at your conference venue. Note these are my words converted into synthetic speech via a tool from Social Enterprise RoboBraille. You were talking about encryption. The best solution is to send all your documents out in Braille. In fact, I've done it to the Queen. She sent me a letter in standard print announcing an award in the 2017 New Year's Honours List for great work, largely by NHS England, for a new accessible information standard. AIS requires documents to be sent to patients in accessible formats. Since I could not read the Queen's letter, I sent back a thank you in Braille. Another inaccessible letter came back from the Queen's private secretary, saying, Her Majesty did have arrived, good life. Here are a few other things relevant to today's conference and digital inclusion. Public sector, website and mobile app, accessibility requirements 2018 is a law impacting all public sector organizations. I'm working with the Government Digital Service to promote awareness and action on this law. Note that the Government Digital Service is part of the Cabinet Office. They might be put in closer contact with those from the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport at your conference. I'm able to do things online largely due to the good work and help from friends at various universities and charities. One tool from them, for example, is the Digital Accessibility Toolkit. It's likely to be adopted by the Government Digital Service and is already in use in schools and colleges. Thank you for this opportunity to reinforce accessibility as part of digital inclusion.
Finally, a positive message today. That's pretty good. We had to wait until the last session to start getting a bit more positive about things. How are you all doing at the moment? Are you feeling okay? This is the last session before the drinks, so just hang on for another 20-25 minutes and then you'll be able to go and drink on the IGF expense, or should I say on Nominate's expense. Okay, well, this is meant to sum up a little bit the day's discussions and to actually get a lot of feedback from you with regards to not only how we could do better, but actually mostly what we can as a group transmit over to the global IGF. As you know, this is happening in Berlin sometime in November. It's going to be cold, it's going to be rainy over there, it's going to be a bit like here, and we've got a number of messages that we need to transmit over to the global IGF. So I've taken a few notes, and we've got colleagues on the stage with, of course, Paul Blaker, who's next to me, who's head of Global Internet Governance at DCMS. And we also have Gareth Jones from the Scouts, whom we saw earlier, and who spoke to us about the activities that they were doing and performing throughout the UK. I was going to go through about 5 pages of notes and things. I know that we've got very little time, but in effect, I was just going to say that we started out with some great speeches, and the whole theme of this conference was how to strike a balance between freedom and public protection. And I think that we actually touched on this a number of times throughout each one of the panels that we had today. The first large panel was, for the first time, I don't know what you call it. If an all-male panel is a manel, what is a all-female panel? Because that's, I think, the first time we've got that. I don't want to... You work it out, but it was really, really refreshing, and I was actually really happy to see that we had a lot of younger panelists this year compared to the last years. So anyway, we started speaking about cyber deregulation. Is the dream of cyber deregulation over? There was an emphasis on criminalizing speech rather than criminalizing cybersecurity. There was a mention that more responsibility was needed for platforms to act on content. moves around the world to formalize takedowns. The era of self-regulation is over. That set the tone for the rest of the day, didn't it? I mean, it just made us feel a bit worse. No more freedom. On DOH, touched on right away, there was concern expressed about the lack of open discussion and a tendency for bilateral discussions, which of course is not really in the spirit of the multi-stakeholder discussions that we have. Then we had a session on the privacy versus security debate. It basically said the privacy versus security debate is one that no one wins, which I thought was another rather pessimistic argument on this. But lots of data on the Ofcom research, and as Nick mentioned earlier, that presentation and the others will also be put online. And then we had the Scouts that spoke to us about the digital citizenship program, the skills for life, and being digitally accessible. And we were then told also that there was still a significant number of people that were falling behind with regards to digital skills, and especially in rural areas, and that the main reason for the lack of digital access was actually motivational. So that was an interesting thing. Of course, the UK, you'd think that everyone has got broadband and everyone's got 3G and 4G and 5G even in some places, but nope, that's still far from being there. There was, the numbers are changing. So hopefully next year we won't have the same negative view and things will improve and everyone will have the fastest access around. Then in the afternoon, after a great lunch, we had a discussion on risks, harms, and ethics in the digital society. All the resources there at government services level, whether it's police, ICO, or other departments to address these digital harms that we are seeing. There were several competing visions on the future of the internet model. So it was interesting to hear from all of them. I'm not quite sure which one you subscribe to and think of. The UK values are driven by the Western liberal values. Of course, we've heard of the Chinese internet. We've heard of the totally unregulated US type value system, and the UK somewhere in the middle there. And then there was also a need to engage this topic in schools. And an interesting thought here, because one keeps on asking for critical thinking to be taught in schools, as you can't believe everything that's on the internet. But it was mentioned there's actually a thin line between questioning what is online and discrediting everything. And that's actually quite a significant thing. A lot of people now are just basically saying, oh yeah, online, no problem, I don't believe anything anymore. So that's one of the things that was touched on. And then digital scoring in China was actually benefiting poorer citizens. That kind of frightened me a little bit because the digital scoring system is not something that I think we'd like too much in this country. And then empowering users, can safety by design learn from tech for good? A whole discussion on this about safety by design. And we were told that we're here to get together to work out ethics, human rights, and algorithmic transparency. So it's not just a single topic, but it's a whole range of topics that comes together in this. A lot more pessimistic things on this page. I think I'll pass them. You're already looking as though it's, it's too much. And then trust in established digital companies has been eroded. One of the points that was made. Finally, cybersecurity challenges and opportunities. The multiplication of fora and processes relating to cybersecurity, internet governance, ITU processes, etc. Kat Jones from FCO took us through the enormous work that DCMS is doing in this. And you can see, well, Gareth might be able to speak a little more about this. And then policy and technology. 2/3 of the room felt that there was a negative view of the future. It didn't get any better, so let's hope we hear from you now to change the mood. Shall we ask Paul? Would you like to comment on what you heard today, and what sort of message are we going to convey outside? Are we all very pessimistic about the future, or are we all thinking there are opportunities out there?
Sure, thank you. I'm very optimistic about the future, I have to say, particularly after today. And the first thing I think to say is to thank Nominet and to thank all the people who've been involved in organising today. It's been an absolutely tremendous day. With a really great range of people, range of speakers, participants, and a very wide range of issues. And my reflection, listening to the different conversations today, is just how many new issues we are facing, how many different kinds of new technology and the different challenges that they're throwing up, and also the new stakeholders which are being impacted in so many different ways. And we need to make sure that as change goes faster and faster, the multi-stakeholder landscape that we have remains fit for purpose and is able to engage and deal with those kinds of issues in a way which is responsive and meets people's needs. And we've had a few bodies around for a while now on the multi-stakeholder landscape. The IGF is one, there are others, and they're not as young as they were. Some of them perhaps are starting to look a bit creaky or a little bit unresponsive for some areas, particularly when we're dealing with such a huge range of new issues with all sorts of unknown, often, implications. And so a question for me going to the IGF will be, how do we make sure that that landscape remains responsive and fit for purpose? And I think a number of speakers today have talked about the UN Secretary General's high-level panel and the report that they produced in the summer. And I think that's a really important opportunity to create change. And we need to seize that opportunity and make sure it's the kind of change that we want. In particular, what it says about the IGF and proposals for an IGF plus or a strengthened IGF, which will be one of the big topics of conversation in Berlin next month. I think we've always said that the IGF should remain a bottom-up organisation. It shouldn't be negotiating resolutions and decisions in the way that the ITU does, for example. But there is a strong feeling now, I think, that the IGF needs to have much clearer outcomes which people can take away, which are useful. It needs to, in some ways, re-establish its position as the global forum for dealing with these kinds of issues. And I think how we do that will be an important topic of conversation in Berlin. If we don't do it, we could end up with something much worse. So we need to make sure that the IGF maintains its effectiveness, and I'd really encourage everyone here to take part in that conversation, to input ideas either through Eurodig, which has been holding a consultation, or through the IGF in Berlin in itself. And I hope that that's one of the strong contributions that UK stakeholders as a whole can make to the discussion in Berlin.
Thank you, Paul. Gareth, your first UK IGF.
Indeed, yeah.
How do you rate it, and what messages should come out of this room?
Yeah, so I think echo what Paul said, and starting with thanking everyone for the organisation for today. It's been a really good day. I think as it's my first one, I didn't really know what to expect. You read stuff online and you try and find out as much as you can before you come, but nothing is quite the same as actually what the reality is. Some really interesting topics today, some broad discussion, some broad thoughts and broad viewpoints. But I think kind of upon reflection, the main sort of thing that kind of comes out of this for me is we all recognise, and we're all part of a culture that recognise what the issues are, and we recognise where we need to go, or we all have different views on how we should get there. But actually, moving on to the global IGF, maybe coming up with some solutions, some innovative ways of thinking, actually, how do we achieve these solutions? How do we actually solve these problems? So I think for me, that's kind of like the core output of today, is we can all go back and start working in our industries and our jobs and go, right, I know this is an issue, this is how I think we should tackle that, and kind of go from there. It's certainly something that I'm going to be considering more going into my actual professional career and as well my voluntary role. And just kind of coming out of this with a whole new set of ideas of actually this is a really interesting topic, or this is really where the focus should be as opposed to somewhere else where I previously thought. So I think today has kind of helped me to broaden my viewpoint, and hopefully it's been the same for everyone else.
When you said you were going to attend the UK IGF, what did your colleagues think about? Did they know about it? Did they?
Mixed reviews, yeah.
Mixed reviews.
Some had heard, some had no idea. I didn't know much about it initially, so when they asked, I couldn't say much. So you'll have to Google it because you'll know as much as I will.
I'll have to watch you online.
I hope not. But yeah, no, it's been someone will say, oh yeah, you'll have a good day, someone will say, oh, I wonder what that is.
I just wonder, actually, how many people in the room is that for their first UK IGF? I know many people have been, there's quite a few first UK. Oh, great, okay. Well, we want to hear from everyone, including the first timers. So now's the time for you to take the floor and give us your feedback and also what you would be interested in this community to bring to the global IGF. What are we going to talk about? Well, we've already got some good notes on this, and I know Nick has also been, and Nick's team has been compiling notes and so on, but is there anything that we've forgotten to talk about today? Anything that should have been addressed? And okay, the gentleman, we need a mic.
We've got the final Slido questions.
Sorry?
We've got the final Slido questions.
Do we? I haven't got them here.
Okay, well, this is the note which I prepared on September 2019, Thursday, 3 p.m., especially for this IGF. The part that I want to talk about is Global Internet Report 2019, which clearly states on IoT versus AI kind of things. And there is issues of dark web there. And talking about, as we know, we talk a lot about the Brexit kind of things. So it has to be there. So there is a specific need in now talking about Nepal, where I do represent, as you know, Internet Society chapter. There is the problem of digital inclusion everywhere, and I got to know that UK is also digitally divided. So youth people are more energetic. I'm saying this because I'm a head of computer department of Nepal Mega College, which is a university affiliated with Tribhuvan University in my country. So there are youth who are especially focused to deliver their expertise. Now, I would like to share a project for which Government of Nepal, IT Ministry, awarded us. So it was a project on patient homeland. So like it was a kind of expertise share. So if we can do a global expertise share and in terms of collaboration, that will be very handy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your input. Now, I think we've got some Slido questions, apparently.
We have got some final Slido questions. Just on behalf of the organising committee, of which I'm the secretary for my sins, so a big thank you. I had very little to do with making things run smoothly. In fact, I've mainly hindered them running smoothly. So, but there's a great team, luckily, behind me to help. So thank you to all of the other organising committee members, and it's a bit like wedding speeches, and also to the Nominet staff who've put on the event for us. One of the main outputs, which is what we are what largely I'm holding the pen on, is essentially the messages from London for the Berlin meeting. So we've got some final questions to give us a bit more content for that, because we've got a lot of sort of negativity, and actually the committee's instruction was make this really positive about the benefits of the internet.
Nick, the default seems to be not optimistic at the moment, so that's not really helpful.
So the final was, yes, it's a positive, a word cloud, which is on there now. So we'll have a little word cloud, optimistic graphic to show the rest of the global community. Cautiously optimistic. I'll take that as a win.
We're getting there, yes.
And panelists as well should feel free to play on their phones. I don't normally say that.
Are you trying to sway the debate? Going to remain neutral.
Quite possibly, quite possibly.
Are there any other comments as well, in addition to the Slido, if anybody wishes to take the floor? It's a very quiet audience this year. Sorry, we'll just bring the microphone, because there are people online who are also watching.
If you're remotely participating, you won't get...
Yeah, bearing in mind that Bear Grylls is the chief scout, I wondered if Graham might get him to help us through this jungle, that's all. He's, some brainstorming of some of his techniques might actually reflect on us, that's all. That wasn't a serious question.
So last year people were fighting to get to the mic. This year, I think we might have... Philip Virgo.
I'm afraid another one for the Scouts, and not one for an immediate answer, which is last weekend you had Jamboree on the air, and that's been running for decades for your ham radio Scouts around the world. You also had internet on the air. How different are the behaviours when they're on the internet to when they're on ham radio? On ham radio, people tend to be quite polite and constructive. Are they the same? Or obviously as Scouts, they're always polite and constructive. But is there a different behaviour pattern to previous global social media?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Can't get away.
I believe, from my understanding, as I personally haven't been massively involved, but from my understanding of the Joti, on the internet is kind of the speech patterns differ between obviously on the internet and on the air. So on the air is something new and exciting because being on the radio is something that people aren't used to, whereas being on the internet they are. It is irony, isn't it? Because it's the way the world has moved. But I think because it's a scouting event and very similar to the World Scout Jamboree, where we bring all people together in one place, it's the same kind of feeling and the same kind of concept, just in a different format. So actually, what people are really interested in is other people's values, other people's core beliefs. There's a whole manner of respect going on because we really are just interested in what other people are doing. So the channel that we do that doesn't particularly matter. So whether we are on the air or on the internet, the only thing that will change is our speech pattern based on what we're used to using.
I could just remind people that there's a second Slido poll question here now, which is looking ahead to the global IGF. What issues should the UK representatives be prioritising? We've chosen 6 sort of options, but also you can choose your own option if you don't agree with any of the ones that we collected up from listening to today in the tea break. So feel free to do that and get as many answers in there. I guess you can see digital ethics has come out high. Perhaps that is a reflection of the anxiety and pessimism of the week before Brexit.
And I thought we were not going to mention Brexit.
Well, I didn't think we were going to mention it either, but anyway.
Anyone else? Oh, there's a...
Hi, yes. My name is Jillian Rowe. I just want to give a comment. So this is my first IGF UK, and I am from the ISOC BB, ISOC Barbados. I'm happy to be joining another IGF. We had our IGF a little earlier this year. And it's just good to see some of the topics. I'm fully in support of a multi-stakeholder approach and that people outside the world of tech need to come and give their ideas from their industry and add to the body of work that is the internet.
Did you find the topics at the Barbados IGF were similar to the topics touched on here, or were they vastly different?
We had some similar topics. Barbados right now, the new government is developing what's called a smart Barbados. So we are trying to tie together technological innovations for transport, we actually have a growing fintech industry or fintech companies that are trying to revolutionize our commerce. And so the IGF was very useful. It was a tag end of an entire conference because they understand the importance of the Internet Society's voice and then the importance of how the government has to relate to the Internet and then how the society should guide how that is used. And then government is also at the crossroads of deciding what kind of security measures need to be implemented.
Oh, great, thank you.
So just a reminder, there is another, I promise you this is the last one. And just to annoy Olivier, French national, it is the Brexit one. So who should the UK be aligning to most closely?
Wait, let me answer this one.
The survey's already quite slewed into the answers, so... go on.
So what was the question? Should the UK be aligning more...
Who should the UK be aligning with more closely?
Oh, okay.
Post-Brexit.
Okay.
I'm really interested if anyone's put other anonymously and would like to volunteer what they mean by other.
China, right.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Any other comments from anybody here?
It's just interesting that China beats USA in terms of alignment post-Brexit.
That's facial recognition programs, isn't it?
Yeah, and size.
Great. Anyone else on this? So we've got a number of messages we can send over to the global IGF. Any burning issues we have not touched on? Okay, we heard about AI, and there was actually a discussion whether we should have a thing on AI. And because we touched on some of the topics last year, we didn't want to repeat the same topics year on year because it becomes tedious to hear the same people say the same thing. So in a way, of course, there's a limited number of sessions during the day, and there had to be a choice as to what to go for. And of course, the way that it gets built is we first look at the topics and then get the topic input from the community, and then from there start building the agenda, and then finally find speakers for this. So that's the behind the scenes thing. I've seen a number of hands here. Yes, please, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you about quantum computing, because encryption's been talked about a lot. We've got the quantum supremacy from Google claim that's just materialised. So what is the panel's view about when do we start that discussion, and how does that impact on this privacy, security, integrity, vulnerability stuff?
I can certainly say a few words on this. I've cheated. I watched a video about quantum computing a couple of weeks ago on YouTube, and it was IBM that was explaining how quantum computing works and things. And to me, it sounds like the technology is still quite a number of years away. So we're still at a level where quantum computers are a single cellular quantum computer unit as such. But you never know, things move very fast, and indeed, I mean, the thing we need to remember about quantum computers is that they will provide computational analysis in a lot faster way than the current digital computers that we have, because it deals with atoms, that it focuses on specific angles and so on. So it's a lot faster. I'm not quite sure that the announcements on quantum computers today being actually usable for things like data mining are a bit premature, or they really are working fully. Perhaps anyone else here wishes to mention something, but I put my hand out to say we're still a certain distance away from having quantum computers. Usable quantum computers are the ones that you'll get on your watch as a quantum computer. I
think the point is it's a long time since I did undergraduate physics, but I did do that, I think it's a good example of what could potentially be a rapidly disruptive technology if nothing can be safely encrypted going forwards. I think the point is well made, and that could be quite scary.
The difficulty with quantum computers is because it tries to emulate the way the human brain works, or essentially at the end of the day it might be able to emulate the way the human brain works, which is we don't work in binary, and this thing doesn't work in binary. Then there's the issue of singularity at that point. So that opens a whole can of worms for was it 2030 UK IGF? So we can put that on the list for the successors later on to deal with. Paul, you wanted to say a few words?
Maybe take a slightly different view on this. I think one reflection for me from many conversations today is how policymakers need to engage better with very early stage emerging technology, and this is one example. I think DOH was another example of that, where it went through the IETF very quickly before many governments had really woken up to what the policy implications might be. And I think partly as a result of DOH, a number of governments now are starting to think about how they can engage better and earlier in those kinds of technical developments. And vice versa, it works the other way. I think there are more people in the technical community who are speaking up and realizing there's more work they need to do to talk about and think about the policy implications of the kind of early stage tech that they're engaged with. And that's why I think the IGF and strengthening the IGF is so important, because that's the one forum we have which should be bringing those stakeholders together to have these kinds of conversations. I'm not an expert on quantum by any means, but I do think it should be on the agenda, and it's one of those issues that we should be thinking about when we're looking at the future of the internet governance landscape and the multi-stakeholder model.
All right, thank you, Paul. Let's go to the next person, please. Yes.
Hello. A lot of the discussion we've had today has been about the interaction between governments and big tech. And I'm looking around the room, and I don't think there are many people from those big tech companies in the room. And so I guess it's a question, which is, how do we get those representatives to turn up so that we can have that conversation where they can put forward their points of view and actually take something back constructive from this forum?
Yeah, thanks for this. I don't know if anybody here has a view on this. It's a discussion that we've seen take place in the multi-stakeholder advisory group, the MAG, on the global IGF, having to bring the private sector into the discussions. And I'm also happen to be involved with Eurodig, the European IGF, and that's also a difficulty to attract people that have targets that they need to achieve, key performance indicators, and what kind of KPI do they get from attending a day where they're discussing the bigger picture as such. But I think that on the panels we did have a number of people from the private sector, and one of the things is to try and get more people from the private sector that might be well known in the private sector to attract more private sector participants in the room. If you have any idea on, by the way, how to, and if anybody else has an idea on how to attract more private sector representatives, then that would be really, really great. We'd love to hear.
It's a fair point. I mean, you look at the dominance of Google and Facebook and Apple, and yet they're not in this room. I'll just say that we have had representatives from those companies in past years, Facebook a couple of years ago, so they're not without representation. They certainly are invited. You can't make horses drink even if you bring them to the water.
There have been some instances I remember in the past, not in UK IGF, but certainly on the global IGF, where a representative from a major software company that was not Apple came on basically ran through their presentation, and with I think there were about 4 other panelists, and 99% of the questions were aimed at that person, and they were not particularly friendly questions. We haven't seen that person since.
It's a mystery.
It's unfortunate.
But Jean-Jacques hasn't joined Google yet, but you can find him if you can.
But Jean-Jacques will leave at that point, the moment he joined Google. There was another person in the... Oh, there you go. Yes, please, down right here.
Hello, I'm Keith Taylor. This is my first IGF, and I can say I've been very impressed. My viewpoint has been completely changed while I've been here, because I was all for an open internet, but the comments on child pornography have changed my view on that. I'm a hypnotist, and I've been finding or thinking that often when I do online hypnosis, which I do, sometimes I find that I get censored, not because I'm doing anything wrong, but because the technologists don't understand hypnosis. Sometimes they think it's bad because they don't understand it. So what can we do about that when the technologists censor things on the internet because they don't understand it? So immediately they just think that it's a bad thing, in my case with hypnosis.
That's a very interesting question, because we've heard earlier that often algorithms pick up whatever might be suspicious activity, and then it gets reviewed by a human later on. I'm not quite sure how to answer that, and if anybody has an idea on this.
I think you've just articulated very neatly the sort of the issues with safety by design and a prudential approach around not allowing stuff until you know it's safe versus allowing stuff until you know that it's unsafe. And it's just that you can't have both.
I guess it's in the human's nature, as in if you don't understand something, Maslow's pyramid will basically make you feel a bit wary about it and think, well, I'd like to see before placing a judgment on it. But yeah, it's an interesting thought here. I'm not seeing anybody with an answer. Oh, maybe the gentleman over there. You have an answer? It's another question. Okay. We have time for one more?
Another point,
okay.
Rather than the internet censorship, how much effort goes into counter-terrorism and how much goes into sort of child abuse? There's a disparate amount of focus from the international community, especially on the internet, of where the focus is. You think the last 10 years, terrorism online, a lot of focus has gone on that, and still under-resourced, under-focused all this stuff like the Internet Watch Foundation did. So maybe sort of focus on where we should put our priorities as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I was going to say we should wrap up because we're already a little bit over. But I was going to say that it is an open process, and in terms of the agenda setting for 2020, in terms of the outputs from this meeting, there is a contact on the UK IGF website. Any sort of contribution, any sort of after-event thoughts as to significant findings, future participation, future topics for the agenda. These are all done in this classic sort of multi-stakeholder way where everybody's inputs are very much welcomed and appreciated. I think that's just another one point which could easily and usefully be put into future discussions, because it's obviously a major point.
And the end of one UK IGF signifies the beginning of the preparation for the next one. So the members of the committee, of which there's many I can see around the room, are going to have a wonderful call next week to debrief.
Yeah.
And so if you, in the meantime, have any feedback that you get when you walk home and so on, just email the UK IGF email address, and then we'll take that into consideration. And I guess afterwards, the next thing is going to have to do the public call for issues again. And,
absolutely. But before we do anything else, we need to go to our refreshments, which are just over the way, and we can continue the conversations there without the spotlights in your eyes.
Sounds like a super idea. So thanks to all of you for having survived the day and for having responded present to the call to come to discuss these issues here. Thanks to Nominate very much for being the secretariat for this, and thanks to the committee for putting the whole thing together. Thanks to the staff that have been dealing with great audio and video, etc. So it's all worked out pretty well. And yeah, I better shut up, otherwise you're not going to get any drinks. So.